Genre, fiction. Essential question: what can we see in the sky? Read about what Mr. Putter and Tabby see in the nighttime sky. Mr. Putter and Tabby See the Stars by Cynthia Rylant. Illustrated by Arthur Howard. Chapter 1, Logs. Chapter 2, Grumble. Chapter 3, Stars. Chapter 1, Logs. Mr. Putter and his fine cat Tabby loved to sleep. They could sleep anywhere. They slept in chairs, in swings, in cars, in tubs, and sometimes in the laundry room. Mr. Putter and Tabby also slept in a bed. Of course, most of the time, sleeping in a bed was just fine. Mr. Putter plumped his pillow. Tabby squished hers, and then they slept like logs. But one night, one of the logs could not sleep. Chapter 2, Grumble. Mr. Putter was the log who could not sleep. He could not sleep because he had eaten too many pineapple jelly rolls at Mrs. Teaberry's house. Mrs. Teaberry was Mr. Putter's good friend and neighbor, and she liked to feed him. She liked to feed everybody, but most of all, she liked to feed Mr. Putter. She was always sending her good dog Zeke over to Mr. Putter's house with a note. The note always said, "Are you hungry?" And Mr. Putter always said yes. So he and Tabby went next door a lot. But tonight Mr. Putter had been having such a good time that he lost track and ate 21 jelly rolls. He forgot to count them as he popped them one at a time into his mouth. Before he knew it, 21 jelly rolls were gone, and it was time to go home. Mrs. Teaberry was happy that Mr. Putter enjoyed her jelly rolls so much. But Mr. Putter's stomach was not. It grumbled and grumbled and grumbled. Mr. Putter looked at his nice, soft bed when he got home. Grumble grumbled his stomach. Mr. Putter knew he would not be able to sleep with all that grumbling. What to do? Mr. Putter looked at Tabby. Then he got an idea. Chapter 3, Stars. "Let's go for a walk," Mr. Putter said. He put his coat back on. He put his hat back on. He picked up Tabby, and out the door they went. It was a beautiful night. The moon was full and moonlight was everywhere. Tabby looked. She listened. She twitched her ears. She twitched her tail. She loved the night. Mr. Putter loved it too, even with a grumbling stomach. Stop and check. Reread. Why is Mr. Putter's stomach grumbling? Reread to check your understanding. Mr. Putter looked up at the sky. He showed Tabby the stars, and he told her all about them. He told her that the Big Dipper was full of milk from the Milky Way. Tabby purred. She loved milk. He told her about looking at stars when he was a boy, and how he had always wanted to ride in a rocket ship. He told her how he had always dreamed of adventure. Tabby purred some more. Mr. Putter and Tabby made a nice big circle around the neighborhood. They looked at the sky. They looked at the yellow lights of the houses. They looked at cats sitting in windows, looking back at them. And when at last they circled back home, they stopped in front of Mrs. Teaberry's house. Mrs. Teaberry and Zeke were on the front lawn. "Mrs. Teaberry, what are you doing up?" asked Mr. Putter. Stop and check. Reread. Mr. Putter asks why Mrs. Teaberry is up. Why is Mr. Putter up too? Reread to check your understanding. "Zeke has a grumbling stomach," said Mrs. Teaberry. "He ate too many jelly rolls and we can't sleep." Mr. Putter and Tabby were delighted. They sat on the lawn with Mrs. Teaberry and Zeke. Mr. Putter's stomach and Zeke's stomach talked to each other, while Mr. Putter and Mrs. Teaberry talked to each other. They told stories in the moonlight. They told secrets. They made each other laugh. Then when the stomachs on the front lawn stopped grumbling, everyone said good night, went to bed, and slept like logs. In the morning, Mr. Putter heard a scratching at the door. He opened it. It was Zeke with a note. The note said, "Are you hungry?" Mr. Putter smiled. He picked up Tabby, and together they walked next door. About the author and illustrator. Cynthia Rylant was a teacher and a librarian before she became a writer. She began reading children's books while working at a library. That's when she decided she wanted to make her own. When she gets an idea, she says, "I sit down with pen and paper and soon I've got a story going." Arthur Howard used to be an actor in plays and on television. Now he writes and illustrates books for children. When he started the Mr. Putter and Tabby series, Arthur drew Mr. Putter to look like his own father. Tabby is based on his mother's cat, Red. Author's purpose. Cynthia divides Mr. Putter and Tabby See the Stars into chapters. Why do you think she uses the chapter names Logs, Grumbles, and Stars? Respond to reading. Summarize. Use important details to summarize what happens in the story. Information from your sequence chart may help you. Text evidence. 1. How do you know Mr. Putter and Tabby See the Stars is fiction? 2. Do Mr. Putter and Tabby see the stars before or after Mr. Putter eats too many jelly rolls? Use details in the story to support your answer. 3. Use what you know about compound words to figure out the meaning of everywhere on page 241 of the story. 4. Write about the sequence of events in Mr. Putter and Tabby See the Stars. Tell what happens at the beginning, in the middle, and at the end. Make connections. What do Mr. Putter and Tabby see in the sky? Tell about something that you can see or have learned about the nighttime sky. Genre: expository text. Compare texts. Read about the daytime and nighttime skies. Day to night. Your alarm clock rings. Beep, beep, beep. You turn it off, stretch, and get out of bed. You look out the window and see the daytime sky. The daytime sky. The sky is light today. It is blue with white clouds and the bright sun. The sun is the brightest object in the sky. It looks small, but that is because it is far from Earth. Sometimes the daytime sky has clouds. The sun. The sun is actually a star. Like all stars, it is a huge ball of hot gases. The sun is much larger than the Earth. It is the Earth's closest star, but there are many stars in the sky. In fact, there are too many stars in the sky to count. We cannot see them during the day because the sun's light makes our sky too bright. Hello, sun. Goodbye, sun. If you watched the sun all day, it would look like it moves across the sky. But the sun does not move. Even though you cannot feel it, Earth is turning. It makes one full turn in 24 hours, or one day. For about half of those hours, the place where you live faces the sun. It is daytime. The rest of the time, your home is not facing the sun. Then it is dark. When the sun is shining on your home, it is daytime. Then the earth turns. When your home faces away from the sun, it is nighttime. The nighttime sky. At the end of the day, you look out the window before you get into bed. The sky is dark. It is nighttime. Tonight you see part of the moon. Without the bright light from the sun, you are able to see light from many stars. The stars look like tiny points of light, but each one is very big. The moon. The moon is a large ball made of rock. As Earth spins, the moon turns around Earth. It takes about 1 month for the moon to go around Earth one time. The sun's light shines on the moon. As the moon moves during a month, the amount of sunlight shining on the moon at night changes. This changes how we see the moon. We see moonlight because the sun's light shines on the moon. Phases of the moon. We see a full moon, also called a harvest moon, about once a month. Make connections. What can you see in the daytime and nighttime sky? What do people like to look for or watch in the sky?